Well, good morning and welcome to a new week. Some of you may have noticed that over the weekend I posted up a poem on the Step by Step Facebook page, and I thought I'd begin this week by perhaps reading you the poem. The idea of whether stories are living things or not is something that has been churning around in my mind and I've heard other people speak about for many years. And you know how it is, just suddenly ideas all come together and the words are expressed and lo and behold, a poem is made. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's a poem. But here's a poem about stories. And quite often it can help to hear the poet read their own work so you get a greater sense of what's going on with that particular poem. Sometimes it doesn't help. Sometimes it's better to get a detached actor involved. But I thought I'd begin this week, by sharing the poem too. So I've got it here on my iPad, and I'm going to use that because I haven't learnt it yet. Of course, it's still quite fresh. But here we go. Are stories living things? Are stories living things? If so, then are they animal or are they vegetable? Or something in between, like mold or mushrooms? Or how about between the living and the mineral, like viruses? When in school in biology, I learned that there are 7 signs of life. MERRING was the acronym. M for movement, E for excretion, and R for reproduction. Another R for respiration, I for irritability, N nutrition, and finally G, that stood for growth. So, do stories show the 7 signs of life? We know that stories move about, traveling across the world, and gossip moves so fast. It's hard to catch, to stop it. And like a weed, such stories grow, twisting, turning, changing, choking, fast destroying the beautiful life story of a decent individual, infecting the colorful history of some other people group. Like a pandemic, it spreads through a population, adapting, mutating, and absorbing disparate parts of other stories to form a great conspiracy, one thick, ubiquitous, rising meta-narrative. And social media? A fertile land for stories, but saturated with supergrow. A story on such steroids explodes into an angry, multi-headed monster. Oh, but what about endangered species? Stories that are disappearing and need to be preserved, whilst other stories must be found and placed in quiet sanctuary. A library. Could we call this a zoo for stories? Each tale held within the binding of a book, like seeds preserved and dormant, but ready to grow inside the mind and heart of the next open-minded reader, caressing their imagination, weaving with the memories of that person, and waiting now to multiply when next the reader tells that story. But stories, like cats and dogs, need humans to survive, to have existed in the first place. How many communities for generations have ended every day curled up by the fire with their dogs and cats and stories? If one day humanity ends, the cats go wild and the dogs whimper for their masters, what will the stories do? These life forms so intimately woven with their host, not parasites, but living once in symbiosis. The only ones to survive will be those kept safe in books, or online in some electronic database. No longer moving, no more excretion, No more breath or reproduction. No sensitivity. No more absorption. No more growth, but simply waiting, hibernating, frozen in time for another reader. And then they'll spring to life again and fill the air with the stories of this long-lost species. Will stories outlive us? I guess we'll never know. Well, if you fancy being a story tamer or a story keeper, Step by Step is still running, of course, with our online sessions, and on Wednesday we have Micromodule 2, which is using metaphors and archetypes, two things essential to storytelling. I know that last week those that came along really appreciated the session. It was an exciting time and they found it an inspiration. And on Saturday, Micromodule 1 is still running. Had a great time at the weekend. Looking forward to providing that session yet again, which is understanding storytelling. So if you want to understand these literary beasts and how they work and how you can use them, well, come along, let me know. But in the meantime, have a great week and look out for the stories.